Welcome to Curry's Mystery Box, episode 5. Probably. I forgot. It's been about a month. I mean, if it means anything, I did, in fact, spell out pretty early that I didn't, or rather wasn't going to have a particularly regular upload schedule. And sometimes I would, sometimes I would upload a lot, sometimes I'll go a while. So you just deal with it, okay? Today's topic, I haven't come up with a particularly creative episode title, but I don't care. It's going to be called Health Stuff. What in the hell? Okay, never mind. Health stuff. I think health stuff is really super important. And once I get talking about health stuff, like I said, like a lot of things that I yap about, it's one of those things where if I start talking about it, I tend to talk about it a lot. And for a very long time. All right. I figure health stuff also doesn't necessarily limit itself to only physical health stuff. I would also figure mental health would be sort of lumped in with that. Sort of a big umbrella term. And it's pretty difficult to have one without the other type shit. You can't really say you have particularly good mental health if your physical health is not particularly good, and vice versa. And by the way, there are some people who think that it's vice versa. It's not. It's vice versa. Okay, so we stop it. All right. First subtopic, autism and OCD. Gonna start with my journey into my diagnosis. Man, that's gonna take a little bit, but that's what the podcast is for, is it not? Okay. So, for those that don't know, I am diagnosed autistic. I'm not diagnosed obsessive compulsive disorder yet, but I don't know. Like anything else, I'm not convinced it would be that difficult to get a proper diagnosis for it. When did it really start for me? I mean, I don't know. There's just always been a sort of lingering feeling in the back of my head. And it's like, there is just no way that I'm a normal human being. There's just no way. I'm not saying I'm better or worse. I don't know. I do not think the same way. And because of that, I don't behave the same way. I don't know. I just always thought, for a long time, I just always thought there was something wrong with me. Eventually that, morphed into like everybody seems to behave really weird and illogically by comparison. But I don't know. I did a good amount of research into the traits I was exhibiting, and I forget precisely when they stopped using the term Asperger's, or Asperger's, or however the hell people say it, or said it rather. It all sort of falls under the umbrella term of autism spectrum disorder. And a lot of people don't actually understand, like, it's hard to visualize precisely what, like, how it relates to a spectrum, if that makes sense. A spectrum is not like, it's really hard to explain, but a lot of people think of autism within like levels of severity, if that makes sense. Just sort of like a scale of 0 to 100 type shit. Where if you're a 0, you don't have autism. Where if you're 100, you're like totally nonverbal, or whatever you picture whenever you think of someone with severe autism. And that's not what they mean by a spectrum. A spectrum doesn't just have an x-axis. It's got a y-axis and a z-axis. Autism can manifest in all different shapes and sizes, basically. Some people may exhibit traits in one area and not at all in another, and vice versa. We're starting to think that my oldest stepson is probably autistic as well. And if you're not like well versed enough on like how the actual how diagnosing things works and how like relating that to the spectrum actually works, you get to thinking that, wow, they can't be autistic. And that's just not true. Like I said, comes in all shapes, sizes, flavors. I couldn't really boil it down precisely, but he's definitely not quite like me. But why would he be? It all sort of came to a head for me once I joined the military. I mean, I don't know if it was precisely when I joined. No, it was like a few years into being into the military. Just socializing with enough people started to get me to realize that, like, okay, there's definitely something not wrong with me, but definitely different. Did what research I could, and the more research I did, the more I realized all signs seem to be pointing toward, at the time, Asperger's syndrome. Or Asperger's disorder. I forgot. It's been so long since I've used the term that I literally don't even remember what it's called anymore. But that's where I landed. And I looked at all of the traits. And I was like, yeah, that's definitely me. I think it's previously labeled as... what was it? High functioning autism, I think is what they used to call it. And like I said, I forget precisely when they started doing it, but they sort of just lump it all together. It's more accurate to lump it all together and have it all under one big umbrella. Autism spectrum disorder. Kind of hard to think of where else that went, honestly. Wait a minute. Actually, wait, no. I'm struggling to remember, but it's coming back to me now. Met a friend through the military who had a cousin who was super into drugs and stuff. particularly psychedelic drugs. And they, you know, they had their skepticism and their doubts about how it is that I felt about whether I had autism or not. And nail in the coffin for me of like what did it was how it was that I reacted to to acid, actually. That's not exactly the best way of coming to the conclusion that I probably have autism, but hear me out here. I noticed that like both of my friends at the time had expected or typical reactions to the drug. Whereas I'm not gonna say I had the opposite reaction, but I had like I had a really specific reaction to it. It wasn't a bad one. It was just not what they were doing. There's just something about like the physical act of looking at a computer screen that just, you know, didn't fit the vibe for them. Whereas that's kind of all I wanted to do. Like I would just get super sucked into whatever technology type shit. And I know it's not the best example, but there's just plenty of other things where my reaction to this thing was just not what was typically expected. I also know now that it's not a particularly accurate metric to judge whether or not a person has autism, but you know, you got to start somewhere, right? Lived with that for a while. I'm going to skip over a bunch of details because none of them really matter. I didn't really know the first step of like getting a proper diagnosis until I actually like until I actually got registered for like proper health insurance. I just kind of went with it for a while. I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm autistic, but I don't have a formal official diagnosis, even though I guess I don't really need it. But once I got insurance, I was able to talk to them about getting tested for it and how I'd go about receiving a diagnosis. And is there any way to get this to not move? Probably not. Well, shit. You fucking piece of shit. Hang on just 1 second there, Rover. Seems to just not matter what I do with that one. Well, whatever. Okay. And now I've ruined the recording. Good for you, buddy. Good for you. They pointed me to proper mental health professionals who were able to make those diagnoses. And I took a test called the Wechsler Adult Intelligence Scale test thing, I think. The WAIS test, which may or may not even be like one of the primary methods of diagnosis, but it doesn't matter. That's the one I took. What's great about it is that it covers a lot of bases, and like not just for autism stuff, which I didn't know that was going to be a thing. I thought there was just, you know, I thought there was one specific test that tests for it, kind of thing. But this thing tested for like logical reasoning skills, tested for a bunch of other crap that I forgot. It also tests your approximate IQ, which I wasn't even looking for at the time, but I was like, okay, whatever. I guess that's what we're doing too. It is just the one test, and I'm not rolling with it as though it's just the final official number. I'd ideally like to take 3 more different tests and average the number out and see where I'm at. But I have, whoops. According to this test, I have an IQ of 121, which is that's not like genius level, but it's definitely in the vein of like, yeah, you're definitely like smarter than the average person, which I still disagree with in a lot of facets, because I'm not convinced that IQ is necessarily like the best metric for measuring intelligence or even quantifying intelligence. I do, however, generally think that, well, oh no, wait a minute. Okay, I think it's still good. That while your intelligence may or may not be able to be quantified specifically, it's not a stretch of the imagination to say that you can generally tell how intelligent you are based on your problem-solving skills. That when faced with a new task, how quickly you're able to figure out how to navigate solving that particular problem is generally a good indicator of your level of intelligence. Because you can possess a lot of knowledge in some areas and be lacking in a lot of others. For example, I can talk about Melee all day and I would sound like a genius, but like social things in particular, it's not something that I struggle with that badly, but there's still some things where I just don't fucking get it, but I should though, based off of everything else. 121 though, that's a little higher than I expected. I expected to be like somewhere around base level, maybe a couple points higher, and that's about it. Again, not genius level, but still pretty damn good. The results of the test, I forget if he said they were inconclusive, or if he said that it was somewhere between inconclusive and full-scale, full-fledged, bona fide autism. But he said, it was like, the test can sometimes give inaccurate results or this, that, and the other when it comes to that particular part of the test. He said, you want my professional psychiatric opinion, you are 100% definitely on the spectrum. And it's just very clear. Either way, I am more than likely going to go with some other tests. It has also been a few years since I've even been tested for this kind of thing. And wherever I got to go to get that done, I don't know. I live in not the biggest town, so I can only assume that it'd be easier to sort of pay out of pocket, I guess. So I think it'd be easier and faster just to pay out of pocket, but who knows when something like that will happen. It's not that much of a concern of mine. Having said that, I do think that having the diagnosis is still really important. When you have a diagnosis that it's less about the label and more about just having coping skills that are tailored to your particular diagnosis, if that makes sense. Even then, some of the coping skills they give you are all right. Some are not very good. But it still gets you on the right path. So, like I said before, you can get, if at all, anyone may or may not be, what the hell are you doing? May or may not be grappling with that kind of struggle, then you can basically just talk to your regular doctor and they'll probably just give you a referral or something. If you live in America, good luck. I do live in America too, by the way. It took me a while. It took me like couple of weeks to a month to even like have the referral go anywhere. It's kind of crazy. Anyway, the OCD thing I think is only slightly newer, because I did not realize that like I'll keep this one a little shorter and sweeter, but like I had no idea that normal people are not constantly monitoring their heart rate. I always assumed that if you're a normal human being, that you're just constantly monitoring your heart rate. Turns out like health anxiety is just like super, super common with obsessive compulsive disorder. And there are a lot of other things that I do with obsessive compulsive disorder that I had no idea. Like I assumed OCD was like mostly about like being a clean freak. But like a lot of other diagnoses, as our understanding of that particular mental health thing has expanded, they sort of accommodate and expand the definition to, like I said, just be more accommodating of a broader spectrum of traits, if that makes sense. You don't necessarily have to fit all of the criteria or demonstrate all of the traits necessary, if that makes sense. I'm pretty sure it's necessary to show a majority of them, but I could be wrong on that one. It's not all about being a clean freak. It is very common with OCD, but it's not necessarily a telltale sign of OCD. Anything you obsess over compulsively, basically, whether you're a clean freak or not. Yeah, so. And the traits for me manifest in a lot of different ways, which, again, I would never have. If you saw my room, if you saw just my general my general organizational skills, you would never assume that I had OCD, but I totally apparently do. I still haven't received an official diagnosis for it, but when it comes to labels of mental health stuff, I've been so far like 2 for 2, 3 for 3. So it's pretty likely I've got the OCD, but let's talk about, let's talk about current physical health stuff. I had a bit of a stint with intermittent fasting. The reason I was doing intermittent fasting was because recently I talked to my sister, and naturally when people ask how you're doing, you there's no reason to be dishonest with your family, right? So I told her, I think I've over the years developed mild or moderate glucose sensitivity. Can't really have carbs, can't really have sugar without my blood sugar just spiking like crazy. In other words, no happiness, basically. Just couldn't eat what I wanted, and it just sucks. So she recommended intermittent fasting, and I'd heard a lot about it, but I never actually precisely understood what it is or why people do it. Before I get into intermittent fasting, actually, never mind. Talking about current physical health stuff. I mean, I could talk about past physical health stuff, maybe on another podcast, but I figure a lot of it will be lumped into the rest of it. Who cares? Okay. What it is and why people do it. Will you quit it? All right. The cats keep chasing each other. Go get her. Like I said, I'd heard of what intermittent fasting was, but had no idea precisely what it was or why people do it. So, what it basically is controlled intermittent starvation. Not really. I mean, not like full-blown starvation, but basically like, if I'm not mistaken, I think because there's different methods, there's different timing windows. Basically, and I'm going to go with the most popular method. It's called the 16-8 method, where you basically starve yourself for 16 hours. And within an 8-hour period is the time that you can actually eat. And you can usually fit 2 meals and a snack in that 8-hour window. For me, for a while, it was basically skip breakfast, eat lunch at about 12 on the dot, and don't eat anything past 8 o'clock p.m. And that worked for a little bit, but then I also realized how that can interfere with breakfast stuff. Because why would anybody want to skip breakfast? Breakfast is awesome. So eventually I just kind of switched it around, where instead I eat breakfast, I eat lunch, and I eat a very small early dinner. I just don't eat past like 4 or 4:30ish, I think. And then by the time I knew it, one morning I woke up, and for some reason or another, I was just really, really weak. Like, I could barely stand, I could barely walk properly. It felt like I couldn't like move my fingers or have like, it felt like I didn't have as good of a control over like my body as I should have. And I was like, man, I don't know what the fuck's going on, but this is not particularly good. I hope I'm not taking this fasting thing too far here, because I'm definitely, I'm definitely eating in the window I'm supposed to, so this shouldn't really be happening. For some reason or another, this spiraled into a panic attack. Because I just couldn't, I don't know, my heart rate was somewhat elevated. I felt really, really weak. I felt really nauseous. I felt like I couldn't like think properly, so I just had no idea what the fuck was going on. Luckily, ChatGPT, the homie, is relatively good at making a quick impromptu diagnosis. I described the symptoms, and ChatGPT was like, yeah, you're really low on electrolytes, dude. So I was like, fuck, all right. I go and I get a thing of Powerade Zero, and I slam it. And obviously it takes a little while for electrolytes to actually work their magic. But once they did, I was like, fucking Christ, wow. I feel so much better. I feel normal. This was only after going to the emergency room, because I was like, I don't know what the fuck is wrong with me, but pretty sure it's the electrolytes, because like very soon after I had the Powerade Zero, I was actually starting to feel better. Unfortunately, what the intermittent fasting did for me was highlight the fact that leading up to and for a very long time before I was doing intermittent fasting, I did not know how low on electrolytes I was for not that long of a time, but a long enough amount of time that there were so many just general health ailments and quirks that I was noticing about myself that the more I thought about it could very easily be traced back to low electrolytes. And I think the intermittent fasting sort of exacerbated that. I'm glad, I'm glad it had to happen some way. I wish I could have gone a little farther with the intermittent fasting because I love carbs. I know they're bad for me, but I love them. Anyway, I got lucky enough to have done intermittent fasting long enough that I reached the stage that you're kind of supposed to reach with intermittent fasting. Basically, the stage you want to reach is to get your kidneys to start recalibrating themselves. When you adjust your diet in a way that for 16 hours a day you're not getting food, your kidneys are forced to recalibrate. You'll be like, all right, I need to be not so stingy with insulin. I need to get better at regulating insulin and just a bunch of other shit that the kidneys do. I forgot. And once I'd reached that stage, naturally I got the list of general symptoms of your kidneys basically go into flush mode. You need a good amount of extra electrolytes on top of water. And yeah, eventually your kidneys learn to recalibrate, which, by the way, I'm still technically in the process of that. I think probably maybe about another week and I should be mostly back to normal. I don't know, just sort of flushing and just sort of like mild anxiety, basically. Before it was like kind of making me panic a little bit. But when your kidneys are in flush mode, they just kind of they pull water away from everything. When they're recalibrating, they put it in extra effort to regulate the amount of sodium and the amount of all types of other electrolytes and all that crap. And it's a pain in the ass. But definitely necessary if you're trying to reset your how it is your kidneys regulate insulin, which I'm not precisely sure if it's mostly your kidneys, but I know your kidneys have something, or they play some role in it. Naturally, this came with diet changes. And that kind of was a long time coming, I think. As you get older, man, you just can't mess around with stuff like that anymore. Your metabolism changes, your dietary needs change. Your body just stops being as good at being so gung-ho and working with what you give it and not really needing that balanced of a diet. I mean, for a good majority of my youth, I wasn't eating nothing but carbs, but a lot of my nutrition was filled with just fucking carbs. It wasn't particularly good. So it's not really that much of a surprise that I was struggling with glucose sensitivity and all that crap. I was almost thinking I was diabetic for a little bit, but then I realized that comes with like way more extreme symptoms. Yeah, no, just healthy, well-balanced diet with way less carbs. That's what I've been doing so far. Definitely, obviously, with the intermittent fasting sort of waking me up to the idea that I definitely need way more of a regular amount of electrolytes in my system. Been getting a lot more of those. I realize I also need a slightly easier way of getting magnesium. So I've been taking some magnesium glycinate. What the hell? Ooh, they about to fight. Magnesium glycinate. Because I don't know how much I trust magnesium citrate anymore. Because I took magnesium citrate, and let me tell you, the liquid kind is... let's just say it's Drano for humans. Like, you can take X-Lax all you want. You can take fucking the powdered shit you put and dissolve it in hot water. Like, if you're trying to clear the system, just a whole system reset and clear everything out. If you've had enough and you've said enough fucking around, magnesium citrate. Just drink half the bottle and just wait. Just wait, motherfucker. God almighty. They sell them in supplement form, and the dosage is way less because a little bit of magnesium citrate is, obviously really good for you. But when it comes to electrolyte regulation and plenty of other benefits, the magnesium glycinate seems to be the better option. So that's what I went with. And when it comes to potassium and fiber and a bunch of other benefits that I, for some reason, cannot think of right now. Hang on just 1 second here. There you are. Fiber, potassium. It's mainly fiber and potassium as well. And I'm getting from one particularly slightly unexpected but perfectly logical source. And that is, quit it. Get out of there. And that is guacamole. You better watch your mouth. Guacamole. Not joking. Most dietitians are going to recommend regular old avocado. But I don't know if you've ever eaten regular old avocado. It tastes like flavorless clay. Like, it'd be different, like, if it was just this unnoticeable whatever thing in the background. But I ain't trying to do all that. You know what I mean? Like, why should I subject myself to the horror of having to eat healthy while having just no flavor in it whatsoever? There's some bad guac out there where they add shit that doesn't need to be in it. But, I'm making guac sound like it's bad. Guacamole is fucking really good for you. As long as it doesn't have, like, refined oils or too much salt or just too much unhealthy stuff in it, which I would say most of the time it usually doesn't. If you get good guac, obviously, so. And also you can even make your own too. This whole thing sounds like an advertisement for guacamole, but I'm not lucky enough to be a spokesperson for that yet. I'm not going to say I put that shit on everything, but I put it on a lot of stuff now. Any kind of bowl, any kind of like loaded protein bowl or whatever, guacamole. Sandwiches, guacamole. Like pretty much anything where I can sneak guacamole in, I'm just putting that shit in there. A lot more protein, a lot more fiber. Chia seeds, yogurt, all that crap. Whatever's in a healthy, balanced diet, that's what I'm eating. And a lot less a lot less carbs. I'm not on a zero carb diet because I think you're a psychopath if you do that. By all means, you want to go through fucking ketosis, great, but I ain't trying to do all that shit, so. Naturally, this comes to getting back into shape too. And of course, I'm reminded of the fact that I forgot to work out today. But it happens. What are you gonna do, right? If it means anything, I'm not in the worst shape of my life, but I definitely could be in better shape. I know that I'm in like adequate shape when my cardiovascular system and my autonomic reflex nervous blah blah parasympathetic blah blah whatever system is calm enough that I don't have panic attacks. I'll know I've exercised enough that that doesn't happen semi-regularly. I don't know. I just wish I could work out directly straight away in the morning. I don't know. It sounds like I'm making a lot of excuses, and I am, but I think I just have to find a better time to work out, to force myself to do it, kind of thing. I don't know. It's just one of the harder things to get back into the rhythm of. But once you do, you stay into the. For me, I've just been in this cycle of getting back into shape, not being super gung ho with it, but like being in adequate enough shape that I'm satisfied and I can actually say, I'm like, all right, I'm pretty much back in shape. And then winter hits, and for some fucking reason around winter, I don't know what it is, but like, it just completely kills the rhythm for me. I don't precisely know what it is, but I just find it very difficult to stay in shape during the winter, during the colder months. So that's something I'm definitely gonna have to work on at some point. But till then, obviously you have to gotta roll with the punches. I'm gonna move on to the next topic here. Current mental health stuff. Current mental health stuff. Can I please? Okay, there it is. Okay. I would love to believe that I'm going through something, but I'm not really, honestly. It's not much that I've actually been struggling with in terms of the mental side of things. I would say most of it traces back to the kidney stuff. Health anxiety is something I've just kind of always struggled with. Hypochondriac, just worrying about totally innocuous, otherwise normal things that the average human body does. But that I just haven't had enough time to adjust to and get used to. Especially, you know, when you get older and shit, but that's just what happens, you know. A good number of mental health things have already effectively been dealt with. And I'm thankful for that. Just mostly focusing on the physical side of things. Not ignoring the mental side of things, but, you know, just focusing a little more on the physical side of things. Which, like I said at the start of the podcast, I think both those things go hand in hand. I think they're both I think they're both really, really important. And you can't really have one without the other. I think that segues into one of the bigger topics, or bigger subtopics that I'll be talking about here, and why I think traditional therapy, where you're sitting down with a person with a clipboard or whatever they're doing, why therapy is probably a waste of time for most people. As an added disclaimer, I'm not going to sit here and say therapy is absolutely worthless. I'm not going to sit here and say therapy doesn't work, because it does. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm suggesting is that for a majority, in my experience, I have found that for a majority of people, it is kind of a waste of time. Hear me out. When it comes to fixing mental health things, I am not convinced that it's even possible to get on the right path physically and mentally, or to get into the right mindset of fixing mental health issues if you don't, if you have any combination of the three most important things out of whack. There are three things that everyone should fix before you even think about going into therapy. Sleep, diet, and exercise. The chances are one or more of those things are out of whack. These are obviously just general terms here, but again, for 95 to 99% of people, I would argue this is like the root cause of a majority of people's quote unquote mental health issues, where, you know, your diet is totally out of whack, but your exercise and sleep are okay. It's like, yeah, we're not going to sit here and say the diet is the least of your worries, but let's say your metabolism starts slowing down, like mine has. You're probably going to go through some, some of the same issues that I've been going through. Let's say your exercise is out of whack, but your diet and your sleep are good. Your body has no choice but to tactfully inform you of the necessity of movement, right? What they say is true. If you don't use it, you lose it. That's not necessarily only true for the penis. You gotta move your body, man. I mean, there really is there's no other two ways of saying it. You have to move your body. You do not have to be like super gung-ho P90X horse shit to be considered physically fit. You just have to use the muscles you have as regularly as you possibly can. Any exercise is better than no exercise. And pushing yourself more and more, further and further, harder and faster is, necessary. Whoops-a-daisy. Let's say your diet and exercise are all right, but let's say your sleep is out of whack. You have any idea how important sleep is? Like, if your sleep is out of whack, like, you have to get a regular amount of sleep. Your circadian rhythm has to be on track. And there's plenty of people who almost take pride in how fucked up their sleep schedules are or how little of sleep they get. And let me be the first to tell you, it's nothing to be proud of. It's really, really bad for you. Weirdly enough, especially like in young adolescence to young adulthood, when your brain is literally still developing, you have any idea how important sleep is. I wish parents were, I don't know about like more strict, but they have to come up with more creative ways of getting their, enabling their kids to sleep just, more kind of thing. At some point, like, all of those things were out of whack for me. For the most part, I think like one of the biggest ones was exercise for me. My diet's never been particularly too bad, but it's never been perfect, obviously. It's gotten a lot better now, but, what the fuck. Exercise for me has just been one of those continuous struggles that I have to consciously sort of manage over time. And I think I've gotten better and better with it as my body's changed. I have to adapt and accommodate accordingly. It's not as difficult as people may or may not claim that it is. You just have to not put... If exercise is like a particularly big struggle for you, you just have to like not put so much pressure on yourself to jump back into something so haphazardly or extremely, if that makes sense. Like I said before, any amount of exercise is good exercise. And it doesn't matter how small you start, how small and slow you start, so long as you gain momentum and it builds into something bigger kind of thing. If you're struggling with sleep, which I actually was for a while, and I didn't realize the potential effects and detriments of having a bad sleep schedule, but if you are struggling with sleep, I mean, there are a lot of people that struggle with sleep in their own ways, manifests in different ways, what have you. Some people have hormonal regulation issues that actually do need to be treated with medication. which will come from a diagnosis from a licensed therapist. But let's say you don't actually have any of those issues, but they're still going to misdiagnose you and give you these fucking pills anyway. Luckily, the pills aren't so bad and it's not that big of a deal. But above all else, it's a waste of time when you could save so much time by just, following pretty simple rudimentary steps in fixing this particular thing. With sleep in particular, one of the biggest things in the modern era is someone's sleep schedule being out of whack. Like I try to go to bed at night, but I'm just not tired for some reason. I just don't get it. Just can't get the gears to stop turning. I don't know what it is. I just can't get to sleep at night. I used to struggle with the exact same thing. And that was until I discovered Raid Shadow Legends. I cannot believe I just said that. No. And by the way, I'm not gonna push a product here. I would never push any particular product or try to sell you a particular thing, because I think that's a predatory business practice, and I also think it's just a shitty thing to do. All of the things that I am going to talk about when it comes to fixing sleep, diet, and exercise are literally free. If you want to regulate the amount of sleep you're getting, you have to align your circadian rhythm with the natural light the natural light cycles of the planet. And that can be difficult, especially considering that our eyes are being practically bombarded by artificial light through a majority of the day. And it's not particularly good for you, especially if it goes unregulated. The way it started for me was obviously trying to fix my sleep schedule by exposing my eyes to natural sunlight within 30 minutes to an hour of waking up, basically. And that sucked, because I don't know if you've stepped outside, like directly from getting out of bed, but it hurts. It really sucks. And also just standing out there for who knows how long, it's just kind of a pain in the ass. So eventually that transformed into buying some Roku smart bulbs. You don't even necessarily have to do that. You can just set an alarm and basically just immediately turn your light on. If you're I don't know, I'm a fucking zombie when I wake up in the morning, and I would rather have a thing that just turns on automatically. I didn't think the Roku smart bulbs were particularly expensive, and it's just the one that I needed. And what's great about it is that you can set it so that the light just automatically turns on when your alarm goes off. And I think that's just really, really cool. Now, every single morning, my eyes are being bombarded with, it might be artificial light, but it's still, for the most part, good enough. And I'd noticed once I started doing this, I was able to start going to sleep earlier and earlier. I also realized how important it is when you are starting to wind down when going to sleep, that you need to inhibit the amount of light, natural or artificial, that is physically entering your eyeballs. For other people, it's as simple as basically turning off the lights and turning off the screens and just doing something else. And basically relaxing or whatever for an hour before bed. I don't know about you, but I ain't got time for all that bullshit. And plus, I think that's just a little too, I don't know, je ne sais quoi. I mean, I don't know precisely what to think of that. Some people have that as part of their routine, but I ain't trying to do all that. I figured out a very, very simple alternative yet very elegant solution. An hour before I have to go to bed, I put on a pair of really dark sunglasses. I know what you're thinking. You ain't Fonzie. Why are you trying to make fetch happen? You are not that cool. Listen here, you little shit. It's not what I'm trying to do, okay? All that said, I needed the amount of light entering my eyeballs to just be less. So I figured, logically speaking, the best, either I'd put on a blindfold or I put on a pair of literal UV blocking sunglasses that physically inhibits the amount of light that enters my eyeballs. I know it sounds silly, but ever since I started doing this, I have not missed a day. I go to bed at pretty much the exact same time every single night, and I wake up pretty consistently to my alarms. And I just think it's great, honestly. You wouldn't think it would work. Excuse me. You wouldn't think that it would work, but it's pretty. It's about as scientific as you're going to get. Most of your sleep schedule is dictated by your circadian rhythm, and your circadian rhythm is mostly regulated by the amount of light that your eyeballs are exposed through when you first wake up and when you go to bed, or when you're starting to go to bed. And if you can regulate those things, then you can effectively fix your sleeping schedule, enabling you to get even more sleep at a more regular amount of intervals of time. With diet, that's a little bit of a trickier one, but generally speaking, try to think of carbs and sugar as hard drugs, basically. You wouldn't tell an alcoholic or someone who's on hard drugs to just I don't know why you don't just stop. Why don't you just throw the drugs away? Because my body is physically dependent on those things. And I could die if I go cold turkey. Did you know that if you are an alcoholic, if you're a severe enough alcoholic and you get arrested and you go to jail, they will give you alcohol? Like, they'll slowly but surely, obviously, gradually roll you into sobriety, right? Slowly but surely giving you less and less alcohol. But they will give you alcohol and slowly but surely wean you off of it in jail. Because they have to. Because the withdrawal symptoms of alcohol dependency are so severe that you can literally die. Now, I don't think carbs and sugar are as severe, but if you treat it effectively the same way, where you gradually wean yourself off of it, it becomes a lot easier than just cutting it out of your life completely. Ask yourself the question, do I really need this particular insert carbohydrate here? And if you ever have to wonder what a carbohydrate is, potatoes, bread, it's hard to think now. Just anything with simple or refined carbohydrates. Simple or refined carbohydrates in general. Your body processes those things and just converts them directly into sugar. So when I say carbohydrates and sugar, I mean those basically interchangeably. Sugar, not all sugar is terrible for you, but most of it's not particularly good or even necessary. Your body does need a certain amount of sugar to function, but not anywhere near as much as the American diet seems to think it does. Like I said, you slowly but surely start to cut the amount of carbs out of your diet. I think the easiest switch for me was just switching to zero sugar beverages. There is something about liquid fucking sugar that just goes straight to your ass. Like, that shit, like, There's nothing worse for your body than high fructose corn syrup and liquid, just liquid sugar of any kind. There's something about it that just fucks you up, man. Refined sugar in general is just really bad. Carbs, again, while not entirely bad, in excess are particularly bad. And I'm fully convinced that just from there, it starts to become easier to get into the habit of just making better decisions and better choices for your diet at that point. And that does not mean like only eating fucking unseasoned chicken, vegetables, and fucking rice for the rest of your life. As dietary needs have, evolved and gotten better, people have slowly but surely realized that like eating healthy doesn't have to be a death sentence. It doesn't have to be a chore. You can get really creative with it. And, once you do it enough and it starts to become a regular thing, you just kind of stop thinking about it. And before you know it, you'll have dropped like 30 or 40 pounds. I used to be in like the 190s. I'm down to the 160s now. And for a while I wasn't even exercising, but exercise obviously helps a lot too. I think that segues into exercise as well. If you look for beginner exercise regimens, it doesn't take into account like how out of shape a human being can be and how kind of low-key sort of dangerous it is for that out of shape of a person to get back into working out. For me, I started just really, really slow with just walks. But even then, I'm not even going to necessarily recommend that for everybody, because there are some people who struggle with like pretty severe obesity. Like someone who's like severely obese who listens to this, like, oh, I'll try walking, and then they can't do it. And it's just like, well, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, generally speaking, starting with doing what you can effectively without pushing yourself too far. Without pushing yourself too far. And just slowly but surely, gradually building up more and more and more to more intense exercises, more intense workouts. And that's really all there is to it when it comes to that kind of thing. With me, I went from sitting at a computer desk for a majority of the day to walking, to then walking twice a day, to then once the walking sort of stagnated and I realized I'm not progressing any further than this, I need to progress just a little further. But I also realized like I can't go straight into jogging or running. So what's a middle ground here? Well, I can shift the weight toward my toes, where I'm not walking on my tippy toes, but I'm pretty damn close to it, where I'm never really letting my heels touch the ground. Straight away, once I started doing that, I noticed, I'm like, okay, yeah, this is definitely more intense. And then once that stagnated, I was actually able to transition into jogging pretty well. And then again, once you're able to start jogging, like, you're good. You don't even, by all means, you can push past further than that. But like, if you want to just stay healthy, and you want to just stay, regular and balanced, I'm not convinced you need to do too crazy of workouts or anything like that. Just have to use the body parts that you have, basically. You have to work out your arms, you have to work out your core, you have to work out your back, you have to work out your legs. Stretching is also really important too. And there's all kinds of different, shit you can get into, and it can be difficult to boil down precisely what you need to do. But ultimately, just get yourself into the right mindset and really, really take things as slow as you possibly can. Never intimidate yourself into believing that like this type of thing just can never be done, because it can. Eventually, a therapist how this traces back to why therapy is kind of a waste of time is the fact that eventually a therapist is going to tell you to fix some combination of those things. But like I said, why not just cut out the middleman and fix those 3 things straight away? Those 3 things are usually the primary sources of most people's quote-unquote mental health issues. If by then you fix these 3 things and you still struggle with those mental health issues, but I'm not saying that those things never existed, but now, once you've fixed those 3 things, you'll be able to be in the right mindset to fix those mental health things so much easier. You would be surprised what a difference it makes when you have those 3 things fixed and how much easier it becomes to fix mental health things. Ultimately, just fixing and resetting your mindset. It's one of the hardest things you can do, but it becomes a lot easier when you fix those 2 things. Okay. When or when not to go to the doctor. If you're like me and you have health anxiety, which again, like I was saying, is something that I've been struggling with and something that I think I'm probably going to struggle with for a pretty long time here. At least in America, generally speaking, when you go to the doctor and you're not experiencing anything particularly serious, they're, in nicer terms, basically going to tell you to go fuck yourself and only come back with, like, with things that cause you to actually be in serious pain. Anything that causes serious pain or rather the only things that they actually take seriously, if that makes sense. Generalized or localized mild or moderate pain anywhere in the body is totally normal, whether you want to reconcile with that or not. Especially having health anxiety, it just becomes really difficult to accept that your body's just not the same as it was. It's hard to get used to, but once you do, you start to be able to calm the nerves a little better. Stop thinking that it becomes easier to stop thinking that every single thing that's different or bothers you about your body as you've gotten older is not a serious health concern. Your anxiety is going to get you to lie to yourself and convince you that you're having legitimate health issues when you're just not. And above all else, you're going to save a lot of time and a lot of emergency room visits if you know how to deal with health anxiety. That segues into American healthcare. Where do I even begin? For starters, I mean, it's just a total fucking scam. I mean, everything's designed to feed more money into insurance companies, most of which are predatory organizations that overweigh the needs of the average citizen and convince them to add more to their plan when they don't need it. I want you to honestly ask yourself, when was the last time as an American that your health needs for regular appointments were actually met and were satisfactory? When was the last time you've been to the doctor and you were like, yes, my problems have been solved? Don't worry, I'll wait. It would seem that adequate health care seems to only be for the rich. Like, even middle or upper middle class struggle with the American healthcare system. When upper middle class people are struggling with the healthcare system, you know something is definitely fucking wrong here. At the end of the day, it's all just like a giant fucking pyramid scheme designed to suck as much money out of us as possible. And it's a separate issue, but I would say our education system is mostly to blame. I'm fully convinced that if health classes actually did what they were supposed to do, then very few of us would actually need to visit the doctor all that much. you know. Yeah, they teach you, they teach you like a healthy, balanced diet is the key. But like I said with everything else, with sleep, diet, and exercise, like I'm not convinced that the American education system is actually doing its job, that it's actually doing what it needs to do to teach children and young adults how to actually regulate themselves and how to actually stay healthy. Above all else, America is just not a safe place to live. Like, even if you took all the guns away, America is still one of the most dangerous places to live, health-wise. I don't know if you've noticed, but fast food is literally around every single corner. Every single one. And we as people have the balls to wonder why so many people struggle with so many different health issues. Eating healthy is, not only just weirdly expensive, but also seems to be almost a societal taboo. Like you decide to make better decisions for yourself when it comes to what you put into your body, what you eat, right? You're now cutting out a majority of restaurants that your friends are going to. And you start to, subconsciously, they kind of start to judge you a little bit. And I know not everybody's like that, but a lot of people are. And I can imagine that, for the average person, that can be really difficult to deal with. Because carbs are literally in fucking everything. And I'm convinced are the cause of a majority of health problems. Carbs and sugar. And if you know what's good for you, you have to you gotta cut the carbs out a lot. Now do zero carb, because you're not a psychopath. You need some carbs, just way less than what the average American consumes on a daily basis. Zero sugar beverages, regular electrolytes, a healthy, balanced diet is not as difficult as people think it is, but you can and will feel a little out of place when you're the only one doing it. Above all else, just don't falter, because other people might not have the discipline that you have. It gets kind of boring though, and eventually you gotta get out of your shell and get a McDouble, some fucking chicken nuggets or some shit. It's not that bad for you. It's only bad for you if that's the only thing you're eating, which a lot of people are doing. I haven't felt the effects yet, but they will. So. I think I've honestly covered a majority of health things. Like I said, I think I'm still going to struggle with health anxiety a little bit, but I'm getting better. I think the exercise is definitely going to help me more above all else. Like I said, it seems to be the thing that prevents panic attacks with the highest rate of consistency, if that makes sense. I don't like panic attacks. As crazy as it sounds, I don't really like them. And I prefer to not have them at all. But it seems the more I exercise, the less panic attacks and generalized anxiety that I have, which is great. They still happen, but like I said, health anxiety is one of those difficult things to deal with. Just so hard to convince yourself there's nothing wrong with your body when you definitely feel that something's different. But what can I say? I'm a human being. I'm not perfect, but I'm trying. I'm getting better. I think that will probably do it for me tonight. It is getting slightly late here. I anticipated this going on a little longer, but it's fine. I can only hope that whoever watches this episode isn't too bored and actually learns something out of it, which like I always say at the end of every episode, is the point of the podcast, that you can always learn something. Until next time, my pretties, you have yourself a snazzy and wonderful night, or whatever time it is for you. And I will see you next time. Take care.